Alright, so now we're going into the different songs. We're going to go into them one by one. Now, the first vocalization of birds, the first language, is song, like songbirds. And song, when we hear the birds just full on in song, that pretty much is indicating that bass line is happening. Like everything is good, everything is golden. And, bass line and song is really going to be indicative of even what time of day it is. We find that most time when birds are in full song is early in the morning, usually about 45 minutes before sunrise. That is when the birds begin their vocalizations. And there's something special just before they begin, because just before it, about 5 minutes before their song, there is this noticeable pause in nature. And it's normally this pause that wakes me up. When I'm living out here in the wilderness, I wake up to this pause because it's like everything just goes silent. Like it was already silent, but it's almost like there was this inhalation and there's this pause just before everything begins to happen. It's like everything is tuning in to the environment. Is there an owl? Is there any predators? And so there's this attentiveness that is occurring. And if you tapped into it, you'll feel it. It's very like something's happening. And then a single bird will make its sound. And then another bird. At first, they kind of begin to do their roll call. They're like calling out, hey, who's still here? Who's still with us? Where are you at? And then once they do their roll call, pause, a symphony. It is this orchestra, this beautiful, amazing chorus of song of all the different birds. Now, depending on where you are, will depend on what kind of birds are singing. When I was in Vancouver, just this previous year, we had a lot of house sparrows. And so those house sparrows would be the first thing I would normally hear, would be the house sparrow or the chickadee. I would hear the chickadee, and then the sparrow, and then the house finch, right, the red house finch. And then there would typically be like jay would show up, and robin, of course, would always be there. And so there was like one by one they would start to fill in, and then it would just erupt into songs. Out here in the wilderness, I normally hear like the varied thrush and maybe the Swainson thrush and some chickadees. So it's going to be dependent. But first thing in the morning is typically when you hear songs, and why they're in song during this time is because they're aware that most predators, they can't see at night. They can't see without daylight. And so they know it's safe. And so there's baseline. There was a time when I was camping out in the wilderness area of Mount Adams, and I was very aware of all the relationships at play there. But one morning, there was a few birds that started to sound, and then dead silent. And I was like, ooh, what's going on? What's happening? And I waited, and it was just really quiet. And then I heard it. I heard an owl. And that's why all the birds that were normally singing, they were silent. Yeah. Another time it was a fox. Yeah. So tuning in. So listening into bird language will also indicate time of day as it becomes more and more light out. Later into the day, you find that those vocalizations change, where they go from song to going into their feeding patterns. And then when they're in their feeding patterns, they are doing what's called your companion calls, where they're just checking in on each other. Then there's the labor time when they're working and they're trying to get things prepared for their nest and so forth. So they kind of have that busy bee. They're communicating what needs to be done. And so you can kind of feel a sense of focus in their songs. And we'll get into those here in just a little bit. So first one, song.